Welcome to Next Portable Console, the show that's about the games we take with us. I'm John Voorhees, and I have my two wonderful co-hosts with me, Mr. Brendon Bigley. Hey, Brendon.
I love you were almost just about to stop at games. I could feel that. You were like, this is a show all about the apps. Oh, wait, no. The games we take with us. I love it. It's perfect.
Exactly.
Perfect.
I've been doing that other show for way too many years. And, of course, we have Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello. We're not talking about apps. We're talking about
Not strictly
games
speaking,
and
no.
consoles and spending money. That's what we talk about here.
Some games are apps. Not all apps are games. It's a square rectangle situation.
Definitely.
That's deep. Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
We have, Federico, we have a lot of news, but, we should first thank everybody who watched our very first video episode of NPC. Because we put that up on YouTube last week. The reception was great. People seemed to really enjoy it. We got some very good feedback from people that we are taking to heart and doing our best to improve the show as we go. And before we dive into the news, I do want to say, Federico, how are things going with your portable GameCube setup?
Beautifully. It's on my nightstand. I got a little handheld. I think you've seen it before probably. I got a little handheld tray thing where I can slot my Ally X, which I'm going to talk about in this episode, the Ashida Wii, and the Anodin 2 Mini, and my Nintendo Switch. It's like all four, handhelds on my nightstand. And I just love playing Paper Mario. Right now I'm playing Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door on the Ashida. It's great. I love it so much.
Great video game.
Still a dream come true. So yeah, and I just want to also say thanks to all the people who listened and enjoyed the video and sent a nice comment about the craziness of the project. You're welcome. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I'm rewarding everybody by having my background filled with trash this time.
I love it. I love it.
Nice.
I love the Dragon Quest art book.
Oh yeah,
I want to say
that was a gift from co-host of Into the Aether, Stephen Hilger. Thank you very much.
Nice.
That
That's
and I
great
think
gift.
the Dragon Ball Z art book right next to that same situation.
Great taste. We have a bunch of news to get
so
to.
much.
And we should immediately start with this new handheld PC by none other than Zotac. So you probably know Zotac from the GPUs, from the graphics cards that they make for PCs. Now, this was shown off before. John, remind me, was it shown off at CES?
No, I think it was at Computex in June,
yes.
right before WWDC, yeah.
Yes, so the Zotac Zone, if I'm not mistaken, this is a 7-inch 1080p OLED handheld with 120 hertz refresh rate, 800 nits of brightness, and some really interesting features. Namely, I mean, just by looking at it, it kind of looks like a Steam Deck in the sense that it's, I believe, the first or one of the first handhelds that are bringing Steam Deck style trackpads to the PC market, which I think is immediately like a really interesting decisions because we haven't seen this sort of thing on other handhelds, and personally, like the trackpads are not something that I use regularly on the Steam Deck. But Brendon, I wanted to ask you as a recent Steam Deck convert or Steam Deck,
the return of the king.
The return,
so to speak, yes.
So, do you use those trackpads?
I do. Yeah, I do for some games. There are a couple of games here and there. So I think the two spots in which they make the most sense for me. Number one are kind of older games that don't have controller mapping. There are certain situations where having the trackpads as like the radial dials that you can set.
You want to play Oblivion and you need to start the Oblivion
you said it. I didn't even have
to
to say it. I love that. My brand is strong. I use the trackpads for Oblivion, obviously. And then also for games, like current games that are mouse and keyboard based. Similarly, using the left trackpad as a radial dial for like letters on the keyboard and then using the right one as just like a straight up mouse is really great. I've been playing this awesome indie game. It's like a tower defense roguelike Tetris mashup called Emberword a lot recently on the Steam Deck, and that runs like a dream if you map the trackpads correctly. So I'm in favor of trackpads on a device like this. It really just looks like the ROG Ally smashed into the Steam Deck. Like, it just feels like the perfect halfway point.
It does look like that.
Yeah.
It does
really
look like that.
You know, the other thing, Federico, that I think is kind of interesting about this are those radial dials that surround the analog sticks, because those could be great for things like settings. I don't know if you'd use them in game so much, but they'd be a very nice, quick way to kind of get to things like brightness and volume, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
So I guess the idea for those dials is that you can sort of program them to perform different functions. Is that the idea? Like,
I think so.
They become little macro shortcuts for different types of settings. And Zotac, they've mentioned that the hardware is almost final, but they're still working on the software. And just like Asus, Lenovo, they're going to have their own launcher for PC. I forgot what the name is, Zotac something. But yeah, supposedly you're going to be able to program these functionalities right in the launcher program for this handheld. There's more. They have Hall effect sticks and triggers. Ergonomic grips, which I think is a really fascinating decision. There's a whole market on Etsy, and after Etsy, there's obviously like these companies on Amazon sort of copying the designs from creators on Etsy and reselling them for cheaper on Amazon. There's a whole market for comfort grips for the Legion Go, which I have and I love, for the ROG Ally, for some of the other like the One X player handhelds. Like, there's a whole market for these grips that you slot into the handhelds to make them more comfortable. And Zotac is saying that this is going to be ergonomic to begin with. So that's fascinating. And for me personally, of course, dual USB 4.
Yeah,
so,
right.
This is following in the footsteps of the Ally X and the Legion Go. It's going to have 2 full-speed USB 4 ports. So no OcuLink, instead sort of embracing the idea of, well, if you want to use an eGPU, you can use a USB one.
Nice. Yeah. I'm interested in this device because I feel like it proves in a lot of ways that we are pretty far out from the second wave of this style of device. You know, we're kind of in the just like massaging it until it's perfect mode, I think.
Yep.
I feel like all of these little tiny upgrades, like adding the USB 4, realizing that grips are important, like all of these kind of like little smooth edges are just refinements more than they are like huge upgrades, I think, in a lot of ways. I'm still excited about, you know, what's coming down the line, but it feels like we're in a really good spot for people who have like really niche preferences about what kind of device they want without being overwhelmed, I think, by choice. I think there's like really only 3 or 4 that you would recommend to most people. And I think, honestly, I think this counts as one. If this comes out and performs the way they say it does, which, you know, that doesn't always happen, to be clear. We saw that with the MSI Claw launching and like just completely tanking.
Oh my God.
But, you know, if this performs the way they say it does, I think it's got a shot at being something that people could go to instead of the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally. Or if they can't decide between the two, this is also a great choice.
Yeah. And it seems like obviously part of the problem that we're getting all these iterative updates is that the new systems on a chip with RDNA 4 are like a long way out at this point. AMD, they're working on, like, they're going to roll out RDNA 3.5 later this year, and they're going to do so on desktop. Like, we don't even know 3.5, even with those marginal improvements, when and if it is coming to these mobile devices. So RDNA 4, like, that's going to be Steam Deck 2, I want to bet at this point, proper Steam Deck 2 territory. So probably at least a year, if not 2 years away. And so I think it makes sense in the meantime for all these companies to come in and say, well, what can we do? So OLED, dual USB 4, more RAM, faster RAM, Wi-Fi 7. This thing does not have Wi-Fi 7. It's one of the things like it doesn't have Wi-Fi 7. It tops out at 16 gigs of RAM instead of 24 like the Ally X, for example.
That's an interesting choice. I think if anything, that's a little bit of an orange flag about what this might perform as once it's out, but we'll see, I guess.
But OLED, you know, it sort of compensates for that to an extent, you know, and also it has a selfie camera.
Yeah, that's weird to me a little bit, but I guess, you know.
Well,
that's the reason we're doing video chats.
Hello.
That's the thing I'm most excited about.
The selfies.
Yeah.
You want to do your Zoom calls while you're while you're playing.
I'm going to record
the
this show with the Zotac Zone.
Zotac Zone. $800 also.
That's expensive.
As a starting price, which, you know, not
pretty
cheap.
standard.
And it's got a 48.5 watt-hour battery. So right now the Ally X with the 80 watt-hour battery, still the king of these PC handhelds. I don't know. I'm intrigued though. I think the combination of OLED, the trackpads, the dual USB 4, and the ergonomic grips. Let's see how it performs when it comes out. But I'm intrigued, and hopefully this is not gonna tank like the MSI clone.
Yeah. Federico, that battery on your Ally X. Every time I think about it, I think that thing must weigh like this as much as 2 bricks or something. I mean,
no.
How is the weight?
We'll talk about it later.
All right.
We're gonna talk about. Well, give me a few minutes.
All right. I'm impatient.
He's got to warm up. He's got. Yeah.
It feels good, John. Don't worry about it.
All right. Good.
Oh, Brendon, where is the Retroid Pocket Mini?
Yeah, this happened like right before we started recording, which is interesting. Okay, two things about this. So number one, Retroid uploads a video. I'll just get the standards of it anyway. They upload a video saying, hey, Retroid Pocket Mini announced. It's literally a teaser. There's like almost no information in here. It looks a lot like the Anbernic Cube in a lot of ways. It seems to have like a 3.5 inch display. It's definitely not 16:9. It looks like it might be 4:3 or something. And even just like the design sensibility reminds me a lot of the Cube, with a little bit of, I'd say, like Aya Neo Air energy to it. But outside of that, we don't really know a whole lot. It doesn't, if I'm being honest, it doesn't even look that mini. I'm like kind of curious how it is mini in any way outside of like the screen isn't 16:9. Maybe that's what they mean when they say that. I'm also curious, like, does it have the power of the 4 Pro in it? If that's the case, what is the price? They have the same like RGB lighting around the analog sticks as the Cube. Like, it really just seems like everyone's kind of hovering around the same area right now. The thing I wanted to mention, and we'll see, maybe this is like not on the internet by the time this episode comes out, which would be very funny. I don't know if either of you listened to the song that was playing in the trailer.
No. I watched on mute.
Okay,
I heard it. Yeah.
If you listen to the song that's playing, you can hear the premiumbeat.com like audio stamp because they didn't clear any of the samples they used to make the song.
No.
That's so good.
So like 10 to 15 seconds into this teaser for the Mini, you just hear premiumbeat.com. It rocks. It's so funny. It's so funny.
Oops.
It's like deeply embarrassing.
Fire that intern. Oh man.
I just heard it. No. No.
Brutal.
They sort of it looks like they assembled the trailer at the last second. They forgot to clear the audio track. Well, I never had a Retroid console. Like,
Neither have I.
Brendon, do you?
I do, yeah. I think if I angle myself, you can see I have the Flip behind me.
The Flip,
which is their clamshell device that's kind of shaped like a DS without the bottom screen. Love it. Love that thing. It's awesome. I use it pretty much exclusively to play Dragon Quest games. I don't know why. It's just become like my Dragon Quest console. But yeah, it rocks. I am hoping, fingers crossed, that they release another one day that's a little bit upgraded, because there are some things I'd like to do on that thing that I can't. But I've been a fan of Retroid for a while. The 2, like the ergonomics of the 2 and the 2S is really nice. It's kind of like a more squared off device. And I had the 3 or the 3 Plus for a little while, and that device, while I think one of the best deals at the time, and I think the 4 and the 4 Pro are kind of in the same space where like the deal is really good if you're looking for power, for performance, for price. I don't like the ergonomics of it. Like, I don't like the way it feels in the hand if I play for more than like 30 minutes, which to me, like, I need to hit like an hour of feeling comfortable playing something to really recommend it to people. And I didn't feel that way with the Retroid stuff. This, on the other hand, looks super comfortable. Like, they really thought about ergonomics with this thing. There's like kind of a like concave back for your fingers. The shoulder buttons are like normal, look good. Yeah, I think this is probably going to be built from the ground up to just like play GameCube games, I think is the, if I'm reading the situation correctly. But I believe that this company doesn't release devices unless they're really confident about them. And I think this will probably be good, even if it has a premiumbeat.com audio timestamp in it.
Yeah. I mean, besides that, I've been thinking about this, like, these companies like Retroid, and that's just my impression. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the vibe that Retroid and they both release. They obviously release fewer devices when they are mostly ready or when they really feel like they have something. Whereas companies like Anbernic or ANEO, like they are throwing a bunch of things at the wall, like almost on a weekly basis at this point.
Yeah, it's really hard to keep up with them. Yeah.
You know, and so I'm honestly intrigued by both approaches. Like coming out, like Anbernic. I mean, we're gonna talk about. We made a joke last episode. We didn't have any Anbernic news, and we said, "Oh, but surely we'll have Anbernic news for the next episode." And
we do, of course. Here we are.
But I'm intrigued by both because, like, on one hand, you have these companies that are like. How many designers do they have? Like how many engineers? What's the supply chain like?
Yeah. Do they have like one Leonardo da Vinci style dude like sitting in a room with like manuscripts and blueprints all over the wall, just like furiously scribbling and downing cappuccinos? Like,
although at least on the lower end models, on the the Anbernics of the world, a lot of these are remixing the exact same parts. I think the same screens, the same chips. Just is it vertical? Is it horizontal? Is it 2.5 inches?
Diagonal?
Is it spherical?
Does it wrap around? Yeah.
and I mean, wait until Anbernic starts getting the prices down and starts making VR or AR glasses. Now that's gonna be fun to watch.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Eventually, they are gonna run out of handhelds to make. Like eventually it's gonna happen, right?
Yeah. I'll give a quick shout out to YouTuber Aiden Walls, who posted a video about.
I was about to say this.
Posted a video on his channel the other day, at least at the time of this recording. This is a guy who used to cover drones on his YouTube channel and watched as the drone market, like the consumer and prosumer drone market, started to shift from the kind of known quantity companies to a lot of almost like Anbernic style Chinese manufacturers, just making as many as they possibly could for as cheaply as they possibly could. And every device had a little trade-off, but they were just like throwing as many things at the wall as they possibly could. And he was talking a little bit about like, okay, what's the future for a company like Anbernic though? And I think that answer is unclear, but is probably like once the power of the Steam Deck or something like it is able to shrink down to a device the size of like a Retroid Pocket, or just like when you can have a Steam Deck Mini, I imagine all of these companies will start probably leaning in that direction, because the idea of wanting to emulate something like a GameCube or a PS2 is going to become a niche within a niche when it comes to handheld gaming, I think. That'll just be like a cool, fun thing you can do on the side, but I think people will probably more likely want to be playing their like console games or AAA experiences or things like it.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, eventually you're going to run into diminishing returns, right? Because like it's one thing to say, well, you can, 3 years ago, you can run Dolphin like 80% of games with compatibility at 1x or 2x.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, it was like, okay, now it's 90%. And now this year, it's like, okay, it's 95% at 2x resolution. Like eventually, the GameCube is a known quantity. It's over, like the console is over, the lineup is over. And eventually, you're going to reach a point where you say, well, you're going from 97 compatibility to 98 compatibility. Like, does it even matter? Like, should you release a brand new console for that 1% of performance gain? Yeah. Probably not.
Although I think, Federico, there's still features that can be built into these at a lower price point, like the OLED screens, for instance, that it will make a difference. Because right now you can only get OLED if you're spending several $100s. If you could get that down to a couple $100s, that would be a big deal.
Yeah. No, absolutely, I agree. And speaking of Anbernic, they have revealed what ostensibly looks like their answer to the ANEO DMG. Yeah. And obviously, to an extent, the analog pocket.
Right.
What's the other Game Boy made by the terrible guy that's been making the news?
the Palmer Luckey
Palmer
thing?
Luckey.
Yeah.
I'm glad we both knew who you were talking about.
I forget the name of it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. But yeah, it's the Anbernic RG40XXV
for vertical.
Vertical.
Oh, yeah. Vertical. Okay. I was thinking about the Roman numeral. So the XXV. So this looks like the ANEO DMG to me. It's like, it's a Game Boy. It's a vertical handheld with an analog stick in the bottom left.
Right.
It's got this ultra narrow bezel around the screen. It looks really, really nice. Yeah. And I just saw this morning a post on Reddit by Russ of Retro Game Corps saying that a video is coming soon, but it's the best D-pad he's ever tested on an Anbernic device.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's high praise. And I mean, obviously, the kind of console where you want to play games that play with the D-pad seems like a pretty big deal. And we don't have any other details. We don't have an official promo video or anything,
or a date or a price or any kind of details, really. Yeah.
Of all the Game Boy like devices that have come out lately, if the D-pad is really that good, this will probably be one for me. Especially
I think so too.
Blue purple color is to be trusted from the photos. That's probably mine. Yes.
Yeah, that's a very nice color, and it does really look good. In the one demo video where they ran through a bunch of games that I saw online, the bezel-less display looks really good on this thing, and I love that I also kind of love that they moved the analog stick a little bit to the right, so it's not directly below the D-pad. I think that'll work particularly well if you're, because these are the kind of devices where I appreciate having the stick there for the games that use them, but I'm more likely to play older games on this kind of device, I think. Yeah. So it's good that it's not going to get in the way, I don't think.
Yeah. It should be good enough to emulate up onto Nintendo 64, Nintendo DS, and obviously
I would think so,
and everything before. So yeah, keeping an eye on this one. I think it's really interesting. I'm sure they will find a way to beat A&E on price, as they always do.
Definitely, yeah.
Oh, by quite a bit, sure. I think I saw some speculation online that it might be like a $70 handheld.
Yeah, sub 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. A&E was how much? Approaching 500 for the DMG? Something like that?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think it was more like 4.
Yeah, it's like Steam Deck priced, at least.
Yeah. Wild. Speaking of Steam Deck, this is part of a bigger discussion that I wanted to have with you guys. We mentioned last time that some hidden code strings had been found in SteamOS, mentioning the ROG Ally. Now, Valve has confirmed it will, and they have said nothing else. They just said we'll support the ROG Ally with SteamOS. We wanna see once again that SteamOS will eventually find its way to other devices, but nothing more.
Right.
No, and I wanted to have a conversation about this because I really feel like also want to give a shout out to Tom Warren at The Verge. Runs the excellent Notepad newsletter and had a similar argument.
It's a really good newsletter. A couple of weeks ago about sort of the position Microsoft finds itself in right now when it comes to PC gaming and handhelds, with Valve sort of starting to really court most likely companies like ASUS and like Lenovo, and the potential for these companies saying, well, do we want to license Windows and still have, obviously we have a relationship with Microsoft because of the desktop PCs, because of the laptops that we make. But when it comes to handhelds, do we wanna consider something else like SteamOS that doesn't have all the limitations that we know Windows has, right? On a handheld form factor. And so I wanted to have this conversation. Like, do we realistically think there's a potential for looking ahead at the next year or 2 years, a scenario in which Valve may be willing to say, well, we have the Steam Deck and it's our own sort of integrated experience, but also you can have a Steam Deck-like experience with SteamOS on handhelds made by other companies. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to happen. I think that's been kind of Valve's goal all along here. I think it's going to be interesting for Microsoft though, because what I'm not as certain about is are we going to see a bunch of third-party SteamOS devices? Are we going to see things tend towards a dual boot situation? And that might be kind of interesting, especially at the high end, where there's going to be pressure on Microsoft to, at least in this handheld market, bring down the licensing costs for Windows.
Yeah.
And if they could get it down to the right level, I could see companies like Lenovo and ASUS having a whole range of these where they have their entry-level models where you can pick between SteamOS or Windows.
Yes.
Or you could get the dual the dual boot version, which obviously was going to require more storage. It may require, different specs in terms of the chipset, but would allow you to have kind of the best of both worlds and have, direct access to all the things that Microsoft offers that Steam doesn't.
Yeah. I think that you're right, that there's going to be a situation where eventually we'll get to the point where ASUS will release some kind of follow-up to the Ally, like a real follow-up, and you will be able to choose between SteamOS or Windows at purchase. And then you could go and get like that Genki thing that we all pre-ordered on Kickstarter if you wanted to dual boot yourself. Here's a kind of larger, broader question, and this is one of those things where I think we all have to look in a mirror a little bit. I'm curious if regular people who don't host podcasts like this one or review products like this actually care about how weird Windows is to use on a handheld. Like, I wonder if it's a situation where people are just like so blown away by what they can do with a handheld like the Legion Go or the ROG Ally that like the kind of fiddling that they need to do to mess around with Windows like maybe doesn't even matter as much. We are all very particular about those kinds of things, but I'm kind of curious if that's as widely considered a problem. I know like Phil Spencer has gone on record, for example, and says like, we need to fix this. Like this is definitely a problem and we need to make it better. And in my own experience using the Legion Go, I wish it was better. But I am curious how much people care about that. I think the bigger thing, and you both touched on this, is really just the licensing cost. Like, regardless of how consumers feel about it, I think it's going to come down to, does ASUS want to license Windows? Because that's obviously going to be expensive.
I mean, in terms of like, what do regular people think about this stuff? Just in the past week, I've had two completely opposite experiences. I've had one person in our group of real life friends just casually mentioned that he wanted to buy a Steam Deck. And this is like a person younger than me who has a Nintendo Switch and a PS5. He's obviously into video games, and we were talking about Tears of the Kingdom, as you do. And he just said, I think I'm gonna, saving a bit of money because I want to get a Steam Deck. Because and the argument was like, I want to play PC games, but I don't want to buy a laptop. Like, that was sort of the idea.
Yeah.
Yep. That's where a lot of people go.
And that's where a lot of people go. I mean, look at Brendon and the Steam Deck Renaissance. This guy rediscovered the Steam Deck, and eventually got a mini PC. We'll talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
But 3 days ago, there it is. I went to the mall, and there's this Italian chain of like an electronics store called Media World, or Media World, as we say in Italy.
Oh, yeah.
And they had renovated their video game / gamer corner of the store, and they had a whole section of the gaming area dedicated to the ROG Ally.
Interesting.
And there were kids. There were like 13, 14-year-olds like checking out the ROG Ally and being like super into it. And I believe that like the demo station had been set up with like, I don't know, some Call of Duty game. And I believe there was one of the PlayStation ports for PC running like Horizon, I think, on the ROG Ally at low settings, I'm sure with FSR enabled. But yeah, like, I don't know. All this to say, I've been seeing both sides of like, there's people who are into the Steam Deck because of what it is. My theory is that the type of person that is into the Steam Deck most likely comes from a console world made of the PlayStation 5 and the Nintendo Switch.
Right. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Whereas the kid who has a PC at home and is more familiar with tweaking stuff and playing around with Windows and using Steam may be into the PC handheld.
Yeah.
That's sort of my working theory.
Yeah, I think that's a good theory. The thing with Windows, though, is it is difficult to use on a smaller screen. And I think, Xbox is and Microsoft are coming around to that with their new version of, what is it, the game bar for Xbox Insiders. They're working on that now to make it a little easier to navigate through the UI using using the buttons and the analog sticks and everything. But but yeah, I think that they've got to get there a little bit more on the UI. But there are a lot of people who are more than familiar enough with Windows to want to use something like the Ally, I think.
Yeah. Just a couple more things before we talk about some devices that we've been using. I wanted to point people to this dream accessory of mine that somebody finally made.
I was making fun of this, but it turns out it's your favorite thing.
Oh my God. So I'm a huge fan of the company that used to be called just Deckmate. Now the company is called Mechanism.
Okay.
They have a website at getmechanism.com, and they make these mounting systems.
Yes.
The original is called the Deckmate. They have the Ally Mate. They're working on a version for the Ally X. They have a universal mount for the Legion Go and other handhelds. They have support for iPhone mounts, MagSafe mounts. So they make this clip-based system where you put a little thing in the back of your console, in the back of your handheld, and that gives you like a universal mounting point to attach it to a kickstand or I don't know, a VESA mount if you're into that.
Right.
If you want to attach like an external battery pack to the back of the handheld, they have a bunch of accessories. They just announced and immediately sold out. I put in my order and I have to wait for a shipping date. They have announced a gaming pillow. So stay with me. It's like a bean bag. It's like a tiny bean bag chair that you put on your lap, so that if you want to play with handhelds at night, in bed, you can place this thing on your lap, and it's got a mounting system for your handheld, so that you don't have to hold the handheld with both arms stretched out. You can use the soft, tiny beanbag chair on your lap to make the handheld float in front of your face. This is perfect for me. I have been using a combination of like pillows or my dogs.
Your dogs are your pillows.
I've done it. And for consoles that the thermals aren't really that good, they do not appreciate it. But this idea of like, well, now I have this soft pillow that has a mounting system built in. Like, I am so into that. Like, and you can of course adjust the viewing angle. It's like, imagine this tiny beanbag that you put on your lap, and there's a little plastic arm sticking out of that,
right.
And that allows you to make an ROG Ally or a Steam Deck float, sort of hovering above the beanbag. And there's even an extra mounting clip at the base of the pillow, so you can put, I don't know, like a battery pack above it, or one of the things that I'm waiting for delivery is the dock for the made by the company Vichur, that they make the XR glasses.
Right.
They make this pass-through dock that basically lets you connect both a battery or other accessories and multiple pairs of glasses to a console like a Nintendo Switch or an Ally or whatever. So yeah, the what's the official name? It's not called pillow. It's not called.
No, I forget.
It's got an official more the gaming pillow. It's $59. It's sold out. I'll let you guys know as soon as
I love that it's sold out already. That's very funny.
Yeah,
it was sold out in like, I don't know, like 30 minutes or something.
Wow. Oh, wow. It's a good thing you jumped on it, Federico. Good job.
Yeah.
I think that this is just proof that all these devices are too big and too heavy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
My kingdom for a Steam Deck Mini is all I'm saying.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
John, can you tell me about the Playdate pizza cover?
Yeah, this is a good one. I mean, in terms of silly accessories for your handhelds, Playdate has put out a cover for its console that looks like a pizza box. I mean, it's one of those standard pizza boxes you would probably find in any pizzeria anywhere, at least in the United States. It has a chef on the front, and it's got the it's all in Italian flag colors, and that's all there is to it. It's instead of the the purple cover that it comes with, it's a pizza box cover.
Yeah. I was so close to buying one of these, and then
I was too. I decided to take a pass, though.
Me too. Yeah, it was really one of those like so close to being an impulse purchase moments.
Yeah.
And then I thought about it for 8 seconds, and the impulse went away.
How about you, Federico?
Well,
did you get one? Since you're Italian, after all.
What do you mean after all?
Well,
I am Italian.
it's got
I'm
all
not
the
Italian
it's got your
after all.
colors on there. So that's all I'm saying.
No, my confession is that I never. I'm gonna hear from you two about this. Since receiving the Playdate, I never turned it on.
Oh, really?
Never turned it on?
Never.
Wow.
Never, because I got it, and I got upset when you, John, told me that it was not backlit. And I remember I was annoyed, and like I never turned it on. I never set it up, is what I'm saying. I have it in my I have this drawer, more like this shelf actually in the living room with
where gadgets go to die.
Well, no. It's like where the nicer gadgets go. So there's the Playdate, the Analog Pocket,
the
Pikachu Nintendo 3DS. You know, the nice looking stuff.
Yeah.
So it's still there. I never turned it on, and maybe I should.
You should. I mean, now that you have a nice sunny balcony, you can play it outside. It'll be perfect for that. I mean, that is the biggest drawback of the Playdate, is the fact that this is not a device you're going to play in bed at night with the lights dimmed. It's just not going to work for that. But if you're sitting outside in the summertime, it'll be perfect for that. You know, and they're short, easy games that you can spend 5 or 10 minutes playing. So I think you ought to set it up, Federico.
Yeah, I think the amount of free stuff that you can also grab off of places like Itch, and then Panic built an amazing website where you just upload the game to the website and it just sends it to your Playdate. Just you could have a lot of fun for a couple of days with it at least. I think.
Yeah, and even if you go and buy the games, I mean, most of them are under $10.
Yeah, pretty much every single one. Yeah, I can send you a list. I put a list together of like just some really great Playdate stuff if you're ever interested. I'm not going to pressure you into turning it on if you like its place in the nice handheld shelf, but you know, let me know.
Okay. Yeah, I could use that list. Yes.
Okay.
I'll try.
Can I shout out one more news story before we move on?
Please do. Yes.
This I just saw this morning because a bunch of people in the our podcast network's Discord were talking about it. But Animal Crossing Pocket Camp is going to get shut down relatively soon, which is it's a mobile version of Animal Crossing that Nintendo built before New Horizons came out. And as a person who is like a real Animal Crossing sicko, I did not find this appealing as a video game at all. It was just like so riddled with microtransactions and was like funneling people towards that it just didn't. I didn't find it very fun, and I didn't really find that it replicated the feeling that I wanted out of something like Animal Crossing. And honestly, it, in my eyes, was just like more fodder for just port Wild World to iPhone. But I think the interesting thing about this, so Nintendo has started to kind of bail on a lot of their mobile endeavors, right? So you had things like Miitomo, which was their attempt at a social network, maybe the only good social network ever developed.
Oh my god,
I forgot about that.
Amazing.
That's a name I have not heard in like I want to say
Miitomo.
At least 6 or 7 years.
Shout out to the people.
Miitomo.
There's like a group of community members somewhere keeping a Miitomo server online so you can still play it. I think if you have Android, which rocks.
Wow.
But anyway, you know, Nintendo shut down Miitomo. Nintendo bailed on Super Mario Run and that pricing model. They had a game called Dragalia Lost, which was a new IP that they made for mobile that they eventually bailed on as well. And I think severed that contract, if I'm not mistaken, as well. The interesting thing about the way they're taking down Pocket Camp is that they're going to convert it into a pay once model, like Super Mario Run, where you can just buy the game and then play it offline indefinitely from this point on. Because like most Nintendo mobile games, you needed to have an active internet connection to play them. Even the ones like Super Mario Run, which for some reason needed an internet connection despite being a single player offline video game for the most part. You know, the only thing you really needed to worry about, I guess, was leaderboards and a friends list. But anyway, I'm very interested now. I can't believe this. It just feels like a complete 180 for me. I'm very interested now in playing Pocket Camp if I only have to pay $5 and I don't have to worry about microtransactions ever again. Like if they're taking all these servers online and removing all of that stuff and I could just unlock it all in game, now Pocket Camp is appealing to me. And I'm curious to see if other people feel that way when this happens and if that changes Nintendo's mind about the way they're going about mobile games right now.
Yeah, I was really surprised to read that because my sense was Nintendo was just getting out of the mobile phone gaming business entirely.
Yeah.
And this is a totally different direction. Maybe they're rethinking the model and they're going to go with paid up front. I mean, they haven't announced any games in a long time, but this may be an experiment and maybe we'll see them kind of ease back in taking a different tact.
I don't think we talked about this on the show at all, but we've definitely talked about this separately as people off the show. I feel like if I was on Nintendo's board of directors or whatever, and I saw things like Delta dominating the top charts of the App Store for months in a row, I would be pressuring the people in charge to be doing something more substantial on mobile in a big way. And maybe this is part of that. I don't know.
Yeah, I would love to see an official emulator with, basically the downloads built into it, and you could just buy their games right from them, Sure.
When you started that sentence, Brendon, and you said we talked about it as people off the show, for a second, my thought was, are we people off the show?
I endeavor to be a person off the show. That's my goal.
I try
plant a flag in the ground.
We try to be. We try to be.
Touch some grass every once in a while,
Every once in a while. So I know that you guys have a retro handheld check-in. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about my experience with the Ally X.
Please.
Specifically dual booting the Ally X.
Okay.
So I did the thing. I followed Rusty's video from Retro Creating Corps and I swapped the SSD of my Ally X with a 4 terabyte drive.
Nice.
So big chunky boy. 4 terabytes, and I thought I'm going to give 2 terabytes to Windows, 2 terabytes to SteamOS.
Cool.
Shout out to ASUS, I guess, for making the Ally X much more moddable than the original model. Like, it's so much easier to open up. They're using the common version of the SSD. I believe it's the same SSD type that you can put into a PS5. Very easy to find on Amazon. Not as expensive as the kind that you had to get for the original Ally. Super easy to install. Really nice process. I have not touched anything else, but I believe it's also easier than before to access the analog sticks, the front-facing buttons. So yeah, really nice experience opening up. I did it in like 5 minutes. I first tried Bazzite. So Bazzite is one of these forks that take the Steam Deck experience with SteamOS and sort of wrap it inside obviously Linux container with a in this case, Bazzite is using Fedora as the Linux distribution. There are other SteamOS-like distros, or a popular one is Nobara, I believe. Bazzite seems to be at the moment like the most popular one and the one that most people are installing, and therefore development is very active. And before the Ally X even shipped to customers, somehow Bazzite was already good to go for the Ally X. Don't ask me how. In any case, I first tried Bazzite months ago on the Legion Go, and I had to revert to Windows because there were so many just tiny annoyances. I remember one system update, and this is toward the beginning of 2024 that I did it on the Legion Go. One system update sort of made my Legion Go unbootable. I don't know what happened to BIOS.
Yikes.
Like, what? Yeah, I could no longer boot into SteamOS. So I was very skeptical of like, do I really want to do this again? But I was reading on forums and on Discord that Bazzite had really improved since 4 or 5 months ago when I last tried it. And I can tell you guys, I've been using this for the past 2 weeks, or actually even 3 weeks. And it's been very, very enjoyable. So, first of all, dual booting on an Ally X, doing the whole procedure, much more intuitive than a Legion Go, because ASUS, they have this feature called ASUS Cloud Recovery. So you don't need to previously clone your drive on Windows and make a clone copy. You just remove the SSD, put in the new one, and then you reinstall Windows from the BIOS, from the cloud.
Oh, that's really nice. Yeah.
Wow.
It's really convenient because you don't need to, obviously, you got to back up your data.
Yeah.
But as I was starting with a mostly empty Ally X, I didn't have to back up anything. You just reinstall Windows from the cloud. You do a round of system updates, make sure you have the latest drivers, make sure Armory Crate is good to go. And then I partitioned the drive and I installed Bazzite, which is super easy to do. You just go to a website, you say, I want to install Bazzite on an Ally X, and they give you the right file. You make a little USB stick with the image for the operating system on it, and you boot from it and you install it on the empty partition on your drive. Very easy to do. Bazzite on the Ally X, the reason I wanted to do it is that I had this dream for the all-in-one handheld. I wanted to have a single handheld that was powerful enough to let me use my eGPU on Windows. The kind of eGPU that I have, an NVIDIA-based one with USB 4, you can only do it on Windows. There are no NVIDIA drivers for this kind of thing on Linux. So I wanted to still have a Windows handheld for Dragon's Dogma, or I started playing Starfield again. Games that require more performance. I wanted to have that fallback. But for the typical day-to-day experience, I also wanted to have a SteamOS-like device that would allow me to suspend and resume my games at any point. Yeah. We talked about Dragon Quest, for example, for this. Like it's the sort of like that sort of game where like it's really long adventure that I've been playing for months, and I play before going to sleep. It is the sort of game that really puts you to sleep not that it's a boring game, but like it's very chill and relaxing.
Yeah, right.
And I love falling asleep to Dragon Quest XI. What I don't love is falling asleep to Dragon Quest XI but being unable to save, because Windows if you try and hibernate Dragon Quest XI on Windows, the game is gonna crash. So
sad.
I wanted to have the SteamOS lightweight experience. And I can tell you guys that an Ally X dual booting Windows and Bazzite, for me, has become the all-in-one handle.
Nice.
It has the best of both worlds. It sleeps and resumes just like a Steam Deck or just like a Nintendo Switch. You press the power button and it goes to sleep. You wake it up after 3 days and it lost, 10% of battery. And especially with the big battery of the Ally, like it's so incredible to be able to have what looks like a Steam Deck, but it's not a Steam Deck. A big advantage, of course, is you have, in addition to the dual booting, you have VRR. So you have virtual refresh rate on the display. That is something that I was not thinking about it. I got so used to the standard, display of IPS display of the Legion Go, which I still prefer in some ways because it's bigger, it's really bright. I do believe that Lenovo has calibrated the display better.
Yeah, the colors are great.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
The colors are really great on the Legion Go, but the variable refresh rate, I said virtual, the variable refresh rate on the Ally, oh my god, like for especially for games that cannot keep a stable frame rate. So you're fluctuating between 40, 45, 51, 60. Having that variable refresh rate is really, it makes everything smoother. And so when you combine that with, you're also playing games on SteamOS. So you play something like Starfield, for example, right? On a Steam Deck is borders on unplayable. On an Ally X, I can play at medium settings. And when I'm in Bazzite, so without the overhead of Windows 11, you can, at medium, you can comfortably play at 40, 42, 43 frames per second, which it's more than acceptable on a 7-inch 1080p handheld. Couple of things that I want to mention. Updates for Bazzite are kind of weird in the sense that I don't know what it is they're doing. They do support all the features that you can find on a Steam Deck. Like it literally looks like a Steam Deck.
Right.
But for example, when there's a system update, the changelog is fake. And they repeat the same changelog over and over. And my understanding is that they are not able to scrape the real changelog from the Valve server. but it applies the system update just fine, and you can get access to the entire suite of Steam Deck features, like Decky Loader for plugins. Like everything works.
Cool.
Right.
Just the changelog is not real. And at some point I did a system update, and something happened. Bazite was not booting anymore, and so I thought, oh, here we go again. Same deal as 6 months ago. But no, I just had to run a little script in Windows and re-enroll my security key, whatever that means. It was documented on the Bazite website, 3 steps, and it was done. So if you have an Ally X, and if you're interested in maybe I would recommend getting more storage for it, but I've been having a really, really good time dual booting and mostly using Windows for eGPU support, or, eventually when I will get back to Like a Dragon, I will also need Game Pass for that. But yeah, keep Windows for that sort of Windowsy stuff.
Right.
But use Bazite for everything else. Thumbs up. It really works.
How is it switching between the two, Federico?
You gotta shut down or restart, hold down the volume down button, and that takes you to the BIOS menu. And from the BIOS menu, you say boot Windows or boot Bazite, and there you can choose.
That sounds pretty simple.
Let me ask you a question, because this is something that I've been considering experimenting with. Have you looked at Play Night for Windows? Have you seen this yet?
I did have Play Night. I tried it last year on the original Ally, and I really liked it. I have not taken the time to set it up again on the Ally X. But yeah, I had a Play Night setup with a custom theme, sort of I collecting all my games from Steam, Game Pass, and the Dolphin emulator that I had on Windows at the time. Yeah, Play Night is really cool. And like you can launch it and log in, and it's like it's much more stripped down intuitive UI than just seeing your Windows desktop.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's probably worth explaining to people what exactly Play Night is.
So Play Night is basically a front end for Windows gaming. And it will, as Federico was just mentioning, it will take all of your games from Steam and the Epic Games Store and Itch and pretty much every store that you can think of, EA, Ubisoft, all those places, will show them all in a front end that feels, or can feel, depending on what theme you choose, very similar to SteamOS and big picture mode. But it also has the added capability of taking all of your ROMs from every emulator that you have installed and displaying those alongside all of those other games. And you can also boot directly into it. So as soon as you turn your Windows PC or Windows Handheld on, it will just open Play Night and you won't have to mess with Windows at all. And it's a thing I'm considering experimenting with for my mini PC that I just got, because I'm going to be using it exclusively for games, so there's kind of no reason to not just boot right into Play Night. But I was also thinking, for someone like you who is now dual booting with Bazite and Windows, it might be nice to have kind of a seamless experience on both ends like that. But also, I think, kind of wrapping this back around into the news segment a little bit, Play Night feels so obviously to me like exactly what Windows needs to be doing with gaming handhelds like this. Like I don't mean like, hey, they should just go buy the dev team that makes Play Night, like just go acqui-hire them or whatever. But it does seem like that is the solution for them, is to just build something exactly like Play Night, if not just pick up Play Night in some official capacity.
I agree. Yeah, so that's the Ally X with Bazite. Highly recommended.
Sounds awesome.
Go check out Russ's video. Excellent guide. Yeah. Okay, you guys, tell me about these retro handhelds that you've been using.
Yeah, let's start with the Odin 2 Mini with you, Brendon, and then we can talk about some of the cheaper retro handhelds that we've been experimenting with.
Sure. So I'll say right at the top, I'll probably have a written review of this thing up by the time this episode goes live, if you want to get some more in-depth stuff. But I've been using the Odin 2 Mini for just about a month, I'd say, at this point. This is one of those devices that I think just feels so made for the three of us, and definitely made for me in particular. But the very first episode of this show, I think, was called like "We're All Vita People" or something along those lines. The PlayStation Vita, I think, is just like one of the most interesting handhelds ever made. One of my favorites, at least. The capabilities of that thing, the weirdness of that thing, PlayStation's kind of, unsureness about how to even position it kind of cemented it, I think, as one of the more curious handhelds ever developed by a major manufacturer like that, because it launched as hypothetically a companion to the PS3, which, you know, didn't do so hot, and then they had to like reposition it as a companion to the PS4. They bought I forget what the company was called. I think it was also Genki? Was there another company called Genki that was doing game streaming? Regardless,
I think you're right.
I think it was called Genki. Anyway,
yeah.
You know, they made the Vita as like a remote play device. There were games that you could buy for PS4 and Vita, and you would get crossplay. All of these things just kind of cemented it as this like weird device. But the thing that I remember it for more than anything else are the indie games. For some reason, the indie teams out there really supported the Vita when PlayStation kind of wasn't, where you'd get like an Uncharted or a Killzone or something from, you know, a first party PlayStation studio every 6 to 8 months. You would be getting like The Binding of Isaac and Rogue Legacy and Spelunky and Nuclear Throne and Luftrausers and all of these great indie titles that went on to become like the legendary indie titles that I think a lot of games we're playing today are inspired by. All that stuff was launching like day and date on Vita or getting a Vita port after the fact very quickly. And those are all the games that I was like totally obsessed with on the Vita. And I think that form factor is just like so entrenched in my being at this point that as soon as the Odin Mini was announced, even though I love the Odin 2 Pro that I have already, I knew I needed to get one, and I needed to check it out, and I needed to play with it and see how it felt. And the idea was that I was going to have both and then just like sell whatever one I wanted to give up. But it was within seconds of playing the Odin 2 Mini that I was like, this is the one for me, definitely. And I think it's worth mentioning the trade-offs here because there are some very obvious trade-offs. And they're all trade-offs on paper. They're like things that you would know if you just read the spec sheets next to each other. Number one, the device is smaller. The screen goes from 6 inches to 5 inches. That's obviously a big hit for people who are playing things like, I don't know, if they're like streaming from their PCs and playing stuff on Steam, or if they want to be streaming, Game Pass games and games from their PlayStation 5 via remote play or something. If you're playing something that's made for a big 35, 60-inch television and you're scrunching that down to 5 inches, like, of course, that's going to be a little bit of a trade-off. I haven't found that to be an issue personally, but the other side of the screen stuff is that we're also switching from an LCD display, which is 6 inches, to a mini LED display. And that technology inherently has a bunch of problems with it that a lot of people in a lot of reviews have knocked it for. And they feel weirdly counterintuitive. They feel like two specific drawbacks that should cancel each other out, but they don't. They're both present at the same time. One of them is blooming in the highlights, and the other one is vignetting in the highlights. So things are getting both brighter and darker simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
The best way to illustrate this is if you're looking at white text on a black background, the outer edges of that text will be blooming, so you'll see like a glow around them, but the inside of that text will have like kind of an inner shadow, which is really bizarre. Now, a lot of people don't like that. I weirdly love it, which is, this is one of those situations where I think my own personal preferences are like definitely superseding what should be like objective truth in a lot of ways. But when I look at this display, first of all, it is so bright. It is so beautiful. It is like one of the more beautiful displays I've ever seen that's not an OLED display. But on top of that, having these weird imperfections does harken back to something like an old CRT to me, or kind of has the characteristics of something like an old lens that you're putting on a modern camera when you get like weird kind of bokeh lines or like kind of swirling bokeh in the background of a shot with an old lens. I feel like this screen has that same kind of character to it where it just feels distinctly like the Odin 2 Mini and unlike anything else I've ever used, which I find really interesting. The other big trade-off is the battery, which goes from 8,000 milliamp hours to 5,000, which is another pretty steep drop here. The thing about that for me is that, and John, you know this, and Federico, I imagine you know this as well too, now that you've been using your Odin 2, that 8,000 milliamp hours in the Odin 2 is like a miracle. It's like, it feels like it shouldn't exist, and it's the way I describe it in my review, and I want to say it again here. It feels like an e-ink device that can play PS2 games in terms of how long the battery lasts.
It's overkill, but it's nice overkill.
Yes. It's one of those situations where you could sit there and play a PS2 game at 1080p in widescreen mode with a bunch of other hacks enabled for like 3 hours, put the Odin 2 to sleep, wake it up 2 days later and do the exact same thing and not have charged it at all in between. Like, it feels like a miracle. Dropping that down from a miraculous battery life to one that's a little more standard, that I feel a little bit more like, oh, when I'm done playing it, I should probably plug it back in and charge it again, isn't really that much of a drawback to me personally. I could see why it would be to people who already have the Odin 2, because the Odin 2, again, is kind of a miracle machine. But if you don't have one, the idea of charging your device every day is not like completely out of the norm. I think that's pretty much how every battery powered device on Earth works right now. So I feel like that's not as much of a trade-off to me. So what I'm left with when you think about, those two things being like the major trade-offs, the screen and the battery life, what you're left with is a device that is as powerful as the Odin 2 or the Odin 2 Pro, depending on which one you get, because there's an Odin 2 Mini Pro as well, which is actually what I bought. You have a device exactly as powerful as that. It's the exact shape as the PlayStation Vita, but it's more ergonomic because it has actual shoulder buttons this time, instead of just having L1 and R1 and then needing to use a back pad for L2 and R2, like on the original Vita. You have actual shoulder buttons. And it does everything that the Odin 2 can do. So it's just a smaller, more portable version of the Odin 2. And that's all I really needed. I think, as I've said already, like 3 times on this episode, the smaller these devices get, the better for me. I think there is obviously kind of like a terminus point where making something smaller will start to impact ergonomics and portability. And I have seen some reviewers talk about that with this device in particular, saying that this doesn't feel as good in their hands as the Odin 2 does. And I totally agree with that. But the big trade-off here for me is that I don't feel precious about throwing the Odin 2 Mini in my bag that I bring to work every single day, whereas the Odin 2 proper is like Nintendo Switch size or like Switch Lite size, which is just big enough that I feel like I should throw it in a case, or I feel like I don't want to bring it at all because it's a little bit too cumbersome. It's a little bit too big. The Odin 2 Mini is like, it's like nothing. I mean, it's about the size of a Retroid Pocket 3, but feels better to hold than a Retroid Pocket 3 and is much more powerful, which is wonderful. So for me, personally, the Odin 2 Mini is like it. It's like the device. It's going to take a lot for me to want to replace this with anything else. I think it just feels like such a weird lightning in a bottle moment for me in particular. Like, this is my dream device that somebody made. So I don't really have anything else to say about it outside of like, it is perfect for Brendon Bigley, and it might be perfect for you if you are also Brendon Bigley. And if you're not, you need to do some thinking about it. I will say a couple things. I've been using it for streaming a lot. It is great for that. I just started trying to use it via Moonlight as well, so I could stream from my new mini PC and play Steam games on this thing. And now I'm like, is the Steam Deck renaissance over? Because I could just play everything that I was playing on the Steam Deck on the Odin 2 Mini, and it works like beautifully, which rocks. And on top of that, the emulation stuff is amazing. And I think the bigger thing for me is like, now that I've moved some stuff off of my Switch and onto here, I'm playing Rogue Legacy 2. I'm playing The Binding of Isaac with all of the upgrades. I'm playing Spelunky 2. I am literally holding the sequel to the PlayStation Vita at this point. It is the Vita with the same games that I loved on the Vita, but all of their sequels on a device that's much more powerful. And that, I think, is kind of the big icing on the cake for me. It's the cherry on top for all of this, is like, not only do I have this thing that looks exactly like the Vita, but I'm playing all the games I loved on the Vita, but they're superiors, they're sequels. So it's wonderful. I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but I will just say, like, on the whole, I think this thing rocks. It is also, I should mention this, it is too expensive. And this is I think the bigger thing. It is $100 more expensive than the Odin 2, which is like, obviously, if you are in the market for an Iron Odin device, get the Odin 2, probably. You will be happy with it no matter what, and you might not be happy with this one. For me, though, totally worth it.
Yeah, because the specs are basically the same except for the battery and the screen and just kind of the form factor, correct? I mean, there's not any other changes, I don't think?
Yeah.
How are the sticks on that thing?
They're great. It honestly, I was expecting it to feel a little bit worse than it did. And there are certain situations when I'm playing some games that are like twin stick in particular. If I'm playing like a first person shooter or anything that kind of needs to be navigated in first person, I'm like, I'll play this for 1 hour instead of 2 is kind of the feeling about it. And I think in general, that's kind of one of the things about the Odin 2 Mini that I found most surprising is that the Odin 2 proper, I would play for like 2 or 3 hours at a time. And this, I feel more compelled to like play for an hour and then put it down and do something else. And I don't really think that that's a huge problem for me. I think it's actually probably for the best in a lot of ways.
Probably a healthy thing.
Yeah, it's probably a healthy change. But it is definitely not comfortable enough to be playing for as many hours as I was playing the Odin 2. And the battery also won't last that long in general. Like if I play something for like 3 hours, it'll be at probably like, I don't know, 30% battery life if I started at, 100. Which again, that's not that big of a deal. I just need to plug it in after.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. I'm perfectly happy with the Odin 2, but it's just the Vita design that really makes my heart sing whenever I look at it. I mean, look at it. It's.
Should I grab the Vita?
Gorgeous.
I have the Vita behind me also. I should grab it.
Yeah, as you do, it's always there.
No, it's interesting that you're using back to the Odin again too, Brendon. And maybe I guess you've never really left, but I've kind of been. It
does look like a PS Vita.
Yeah, it looks just like the Vita.
It's amazing. I'm really very happy with it. But if you're a person who owns an Odin 2 already, I would not recommend like upgrading quote unquote to the Mini, because in a lot of ways it's a downgrade. It just depends on what kind of form factor you want. But for me, again, the portability is everything. Like being able to just throw it in a bag and not have to worry about it, I think feels a lot better to me.
If a hypothetical Odin 3 came out and had a mini form factor, then I think that would probably be the one I go with. But I'm not probably going to go with it myself. But it is really tempting. I love the way it looks. I love how they just kind of echoed the Vita with it.
Yeah. It is surprisingly more comfortable than I thought. The other thing that I should note, and this is a thing that a lot of reviewers have mentioned, the thermals do feel a little weird. It does get a little bit hot to the touch when you're playing some like heavier stuff. Thankfully,
kind of true with anything. Yeah, anything that size seems to be that always is an issue.
There's a lot of ventilation on it. Like if I'll hold it up to the camera for those of you watching the video version, but on the back there's like a big fan grill and then a bunch of intake fans on the top. So like they really did think about the ventilation a lot, but it still gets a little bit hot to the touch. Nothing that feels like uncomfortable while I'm playing, and especially while I'm streaming, like you don't feel it at all. But if I'm emulating something like from the Switch or whatever, you'll start to notice it after, 30 minutes or so.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I have a tale of 3 handhelds, 2 of which are kind of a fail, and one of which I enjoy. And I want to get Brendon's perspective on this too, because I think we've got a lot of overlap here. But
great.
I wanted to start with the Powkiddy V10, which is this little device in purple. Nice. All right.
Oh, it looks so good in the purple. I love that.
Yeah, it really does. It looks different than it does online too. It's a little bit lighter, I'd say, overall. But I'm not a fan of ArcOS. I think ArcOS has been the thing about this device that I like the least. It's a little clunky, a little slow, feels a little bit like being in DOS or something. I don't know what it is about ArcOS. It just hasn't clicked with me. And there aren't a lot of other alternatives that you can put on a Powkiddy device, or at least this Powkiddy device yet.
Yeah.
The hardware, though, is quite good. It's a little bit on the, rattles a teeny bit when you shake it, a little bit on the cheap side, but it was, after all, a cheap device. It was $40. But the screen is perfect for Game Boy Advance in particular. And so I think if you're looking for a Game Boy Advance dedicated device, this is worth looking at because it is inexpensive relative to a lot of other choices out there. but I'm not happy with Arc OS, and so I haven't found myself really using it a lot. The other thing I don't like is the fact that you have to use these modifier keys to do things like adjust the volume and the brightness. It really needs more dedicated switches on it, like a rocker for the volume, and maybe a way to deal with the brightness. It's a little hard to use in that sense. But so that's the Powkitty V10. I also have been working on using the Miu Mini A30 still. This little guy.
Oh, yes.
Nice.
Which is the gold and red one. And this is what I took with me on my trip to Europe recently. And the thing and I like it. I mean, I think, as you've said, Brendon, the buttons on this thing are just absolutely perfect. I mean, every button on this thing it just feels really good in the hand.
It feels like it
really
should be the
easy to
one.
use.
Yeah.
It really does. It really does. And there's one thing about this, Brendon, that drives me bananas. It's headphones. There is a USB-C port on this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work with USB-C headphones.
Of course.
It comes in the box. It comes with a USB-C to 3.5 millimeter headphone jack adapter. So you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you have headphones with a 3.5 millimeter jack that have a microphone, because that has, it has an extra ring on the part you poke in, that does not work. So you can't use your earpods. You can't use anything with a microphone, which is a lot of headphones these days.
That's most headphones, yeah.
Yeah, so you're really, really limited. Oh, one other thing. Apple makes a converter, USB-C to 3.5 dongle. That dongle doesn't work either. You have to use the Miu one that comes in the box. And good luck finding one of those if you lose it. So that has really limited my use of this thing. But other than that, I love the fact that I can put, Garlic OS on that and everything, and it's really nice.
Yeah,
really nice.
Yeah.
But the one that I really want to get your thoughts on, Brendon, is this little guy.
Yes.
The little orange Anbernic RG40XXV, the horizontal 2.8 inch screen Anbernic device, and I absolutely love this thing. It is almost too small, and we're going to do an episode about tiny handhelds. I put Mustard OS on this.
Yeah.
It's just perfect because Mustard OS is so responsive and easy to navigate around, easy to get to my games. The screen is bright, crisp, great colors, and it's just become it's the one that I throw in my bag. It's the one that I put in my pocket when I leave the house.
Same.
And it's become a great companion to the Odin, because the Odin's something that really most of the time stays at home, because it's like you said, Brendon, it's just a little bit big to throw in a bag without putting it in a case or whatever. And so I use that a lot in the evenings when I'm at home. But this is something that I can take on the go with me. And I've been really loving this one. It's actually really well built too. I think that's the thing about Anbernic. I think their devices tend to be pretty solidly built. It's just that their software isn't fantastic.
Right.
But you can get around that, using these other OSs that you put on there. And it's not hard to do. And Mustard OS was really easy to do. There's tons of tutorials online. So yeah, I've been really pleased with this one.
Yeah, that's a breeze to update, which is really nice. For my piece, the 28XX, I think the reports of its failure are greatly exaggerated. I think that thing absolutely rocks. I have the black transparent one, and I will say it is the device that I brought with me pretty much all the time. The big shakeup has been the Odin 2 Mini. The Odin 2 Mini is small enough that it now is in my bag at all times, whereas the 28XX was in my bag at all times, which is very funny because the 28XX fits inside the screen of the Odin 2 Mini. But the Odin 2 Mini just became kind of my everything device in a lot of ways, and now all of the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games that I was playing on those devices, I'm now playing on the Odin 2 Mini instead, which is kind of weird, and I think probably not what most people are buying the Odin 2 Mini for, but it really hit that portability factor for me. That said, there are days where I'm not bringing a bag with me, and I'm just hopping on the subway to go see a movie or something, and I don't need a bag or whatever. The 28XX is the device that is still going in my pocket when I'm doing those kinds of little trips, which is really nice. Yeah, I love that thing so much, and I think you got it on sale, and I also got it on sale. I think I got it for like $35 or something, and that at that price is an absolute steal. And we should probably talk about this more in a future episode, specifically about micro devices. My one thing about this one that I'll just shout out in case people are curious about it and they read some reviews about the buttons, they are about as small and as bad, for lack of a better word, as people say. The thing for me is that I'm playing mostly like Pokemon on it. And if you're playing mostly Pokemon, the D-pad and the A and B buttons are fine, and you don't need to worry about the shoulder buttons at all. And that makes it totally usable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, these buttons are too small. And you look at the device, and it looks like they could probably have made them a little bigger, I think. Maybe it would have been a little too close to the edge, but they're not perfect. But for this size of a device, I'm not looking for perfect. For that kind of thing, for nicer buttons, I'm using the Odin, basically. Yeah.
I'm eager for Anbernic and Powkitty and Miyu to like give this whole genre of device another shot. I think a second version of all of these things would really go a long way. And Miyu is actually known for doing this, like just releasing revisions of devices that they have.
Right.
So I would like to see them do that with the A30 at the very least. But knowing Anbernic, 2 weeks from now, they're going to have a follow-up to the 28XX or something. So excited.
It's going to happen. Just every NPC episode, there's a new one.
There will be. There'll be another one in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, guys, I think we did it. That's another episode.
Yeah. Good one.
More handhelds. Good one. Yeah. John, where can people find us?
Well, they can find Brendon over at wavelengths.online. And they can also... Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I almost forgot your website. On wavelengths.online and, of course, on Into the Aether. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. We are all on social media. Brendon is Brendon Bigley in most places. I'm John Voorhees in most places. And Federico is Vitici in most places. We will see everybody in another 2 weeks. Talk to you later, guys.
Bye-bye.